The first part of this is making sure that you can find equivalent fractions. So 3/5 equals how many 25ths? Just say 5 times 5. Whatever you multiply the bottom by, you multiply the same thing to the top, and this would be 15 25ths. So if I wanted 5/7 to some number of 35ths, 7 times what equals 35? 7 times 5 is, you do the same thing to the top. 25 35ths is equivalent to 5/7. So 8/9 to some number of 90ths, multiply the top and the bottom by 10, top by 10, we get 80/90ths. The next steps of these is to try to decide what bottom number both 5 and 4 can go into so we can find an equivalent fraction. The reason for that is when we're comparing fractions, we need to have the same size piece. So we're trying to find a common number between 5 and 4, and this really has to do with multiples. The multiples of 5 would be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. The multiples of 4 would be 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, and then go so on. They both will go into 20. So 5 can become 20, 4 can become 20, and that's the number that we would use. So that's the first number they have in common, the first common multiple, first common denominator. After that, just what we did, you find out how many times 5 goes into 20. So 5 times 4 is 20. What you do to the bottom, you do to the top. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 5 is 20. And then you multiply the top by the same thing. We get 3 times 5 is 15. And if you're comparing fractions, 15 20ths is greater than 12 20ths. So 3/4 is greater than 3/5. So if you're write it out like this, 3/5 and 3/4, we need to decide which is greater. We know that 3/4 is greater. Think of it as an alligator. The alligator always opens up to eat the bigger one, wants to eat the larger one, and so it's eating the larger one. So this reads as 3/5 is actually less than 3/4, or 3/4 is going to be greater than 3/5. So comparing fractions again, five sixths and 7/8. To compare them, we need to have the same size piece, which means the same size bottom number, and there's some different numbers that we can use. So if we skip count them, find the multiples, it'd be 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. And for 8, it would be 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, and so on. Now, 48 works for both. You can always find a common bottom number by multiplying these two together. And that would be 48. But there is one before that. There's 24. Doesn't really matter which one you use as long as they both go into it. So 8 goes into 24 and 6 goes into 24. So now we just need to find the equivalent fractions. 6 times 3, 6 times 4 is 24. Multiply the top by the same thing. 5 times 4 is 20. So 5 6 is 20 24ths. 8 times 3 is 24. Do the same thing to the top. 7 times 3 is 21. And we see that 21 24ths is greater than 20 24ths. So 7/8 is greater than 5 6. So on this one, you would write 5 6 is going to be less than 7/8. We open up, the alligator eats the larger one, and it would look like that. On the assignment for this one, this is what it would look like, and it's just asking you find a common bottom number, and then find the equivalent fractions. So between 2 and 5, I would say 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 5, 10. So we're going to use 10. You can always find one by multiplying them together. So 2 times 5 is 10. 1 times 5 is 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 3 times 2 is 6. This one's greater. And so you'll circle just the ones that's greater. On the second page, it's listed as like this, and then I've written down on the sides, it's broken down for you. On the first two, after that, you have to add, and the last one, there was a mistake on there, but you have to put in the bottom parts, this part. So on these ones, this is where you would put your, whichever direction is going to be the alligator, showing whichever eats the bigger one. And here, you just have to find the equivalent fractions. Between 5 and 9, you multiply them together, you get 45. 5 times 9 is 45. 4 times 9 is 36. 9 times 5 is 45. 7 times 5 is 35. And we'll find out that 36 45ths is bigger than 35 45ths. They're actually really close together. And looking up at the top, that means that this is greater than the other one. On a separate sheet of paper, copy these down just as they are and solve them. And then I'll go through the first two and just show the answers to the others. Make sure to pause the video now. 3/5 is, or 3/4 and 1/2. We're going to find the common bottom number is going to be 8. And so 4 times 2 is 8. So 3 times 2 is 6. So we're going to get 6/8. 2 times 4 is 8. 1 times 4 will be 4. So 4/8. So 6/8 is greater. Next one, between 5 and 3, we'll find 15 is the first number that they have in common. So 5 times 3 and 2 times 3 is 6. 3 times 5 is 15. I have to do the same thing to the top. I get 5/15, and this one is greater. Make sure to show your work, and showing your work means showing what you multiplied them by. Again, showing your work, what you multiplied each by. This is the greater. For the next one, people used different numbers to do it. If you chose 8 on the bottom, you would get 5/8 and 6/8, which shows that 6/8 is bigger. Some people chose 32, where you multiply 8 times 4, and you'd find out that 24 32nds, which is 3/4, is also bigger. And on this one, most people would use 48. Make sure you show your work by what you're multiplying it by. And 42 48 is greater than 40 48. For this last page, it'll work out the way I had, where you're going to decide which is bigger, which is greater, which is smaller. But you need to go through the steps to do that. And I have them laid out for the first two completely. And the third one, where you have to write your own fractions in. And the fourth one, just forget about this mess I made. Just work out the fractions down below. Works out that way. 7/8 is greater. This one, you use 20 as the common denominator, figuring out the equivalent fractions. And this one is larger, barely. And that's the answer. I'm going to use 6. 5/6 is 5/6. And you can use 18 if you want. You can use 12 as long as there's a common bottom number. The first common bottom number that they have, the least common denominator, is 6th. And we find out that this is greater. And this one I need to write my own. I'm going to go down below here to write it. We use 21 as a common denominator because both 7 and 3 go into 21. And 1521 is greater, so it shows that 5/7 is greater.